Hello, happy Wednesday. Hi, everyone. I am Coach Kayla. I'm an online plant-based dietitian, nutrition, and run coach. And today we're going to talk about how to fuel, train, and think like an Olympian athlete. So if you are joining me tonight, let me know below if you are watching the Olympics, if you are love watching the Olympics, or if you are even an athlete as well, or consider yourself somebody that's very active and you are considered to be an athlete. So let me know below if you're an athlete or you've been tuning in and watching the Olympics. So before we get started as well, just some reminders that I want to give real quick as well. As you can see here below that I have, please subscribe to the Virtual Veg Fest YouTube channel. And thank you to our sponsor this month is Wild Earth. So thank them for very much for sponsoring these live talks. You can learn more about them at wildearth.com. Also, enter our contest on virtualvegfest.com to win awesome prize packs. So make sure to do that as well. And if you're joining me live, let me know you're here below, or just let us know below if you're joining us on the replay. That would be awesome as well. Also, one thing as well, if you like us to know who you are or show your name and show comments on the screen, you do need to click the link above if this is your first time joining us, since we are going live using StreamYard. You do need to give that StreamYard permission to show your name to show up. But also let me know below if you're here, say hi, and want to know you're here. So as I said, today is going to be all about talking about how to fuel, train, and think like an Olympian athlete. So number one, we're going to get right into it. Hydrate properly, eat carbs, consume adequate energy, and prioritize nutrition and fueling. Now, this is the biggest thing that I work with a lot of my runners. And I work with runners, and they may not necessarily consider themselves athletes. Some of them are, training to run a 5K or a 10K. Some of them are training to do a marathon. So it just depends. They might not really consider themselves athletes, but we can learn a lot from Olympics, right? Olympic athletes, because they have a really good work ethic and they have to have everything right to get to that top level of their potential. So we can learn a lot from them. So it's so important to make sure to hydrate properly. And I see a lot of people go wrong with hydration. And that's because, we think we're doing maybe what we should be doing, or maybe we just don't really put it on, make it that important. For me, it's always, I really like having a coach to work with. I do work with a coach as well. And even though I am a coach, I like to have that reminder. It's really good to have that reminder, because sometimes you do forget, and there are days. And I feel bad sometimes when I tell him, sorry, I didn't take anything with me to drink, or I just took water with me. I didn't take my electrolytes. And, he's like, Kayla, you know this. And I was like, yeah, I do. But it's not always easy to do, right? It's easier said than done. But that's why I also work with runners, and I work with you to also put a plan into place. So it's one thing to be told to do something, or told, that you should be doing this. But a lot of times we have roadblocks or certain reasoning why, whether it's mental roadblocks or physical, like like things in our environment, right? Or challenges that we're having. And it's good to even just talk through that, or even have somebody like myself as a dietitian work through that with you. So hydrating properly is very important. Some tips I can give you real quick. We did do a live last week, or last month. I believe our live was on hydration. So definitely go back to that live that we did in July if you're interested in learning more about hydration. You can also find more information on videos and trainings that I've done also in my Facebook group, as well as my podcast and my YouTube channel. We have tons of videos and trainings there as well. So the biggest things with hydration is when it's hot, you do need to have electrolytes, and that's where people really go wrong. So that's the biggest thing. Eating carbs, that's also important because carbs is where you get your energy from. And a great thing about being plant based is most of the foods that you eat are going to be are going to have carbohydrates, which I believe is why it is a benefit for us that helps us out a lot. Um, so you don't have to worry about that as much, but I do know some people too, even if they're plant-based, they do worry about eating certain types of carbohydrates. So when you're an athlete, that does give carbs do give you energy. So just make sure to eat those carbs and consuming adequate energy. That is the biggest thing that even when you're not plant-based, that can be something that's hard to do. But I have found working with specifically plant-based athletes, that's the biggest thing where they go wrong. They're just not consuming enough energy. And what you might think you're doing is not, you may think you're eating enough, but it might not be. And that's why I look at people's usual intakes and I give them some feedback and help them get on the right track. Also, prioritize nutrition and fueling. Just like that hydration, it's important to plan. Really, that's the biggest thing. It's just to have a plan and understanding also how to do that and what it looks like, what things look like when you're fueling pre, during, and post. I also have trainings on that as well. Again, on my podcast, Fast Facebook group, as well as my YouTube channel on that if you'd like more information. Number two is to train daily. So if you are an athlete, if you are somebody that's trying to shoot for a marathon, I've been working with a lot of runners lately because right now is the time to get ready and prepare for our fall marathon. So training daily, I it's not you may not actually have to train every single day. I know I train 5 days a week. That's what works for me. But at least what's most important is to be specific in your training. That is what's most important. And focusing on one thing. I know a lot of people like to do different things. I'm the same way. But I finally realized that if I wanted to be good at anything or really put my energy and time, if I did that in one specific sport or one specific thing that I focused on, then I could really achieve something, right? I could really see if I can reach my potential. So that's kind of what I decided to do, even though there were like I love fitness and there was a time where I got into lifting more weights and I ran a little bit. I got into more weightlifting, strength training, and then I kind of went back to the running because I realized, well, that's my passion. That's what I really want to do. And I want to see if I can really what I can do with this and see my potential. So now I'm much more specific in the training that I do. So I don't spend a lot of time because I don't have a lot of extra time to go to the gym and lift weights. And yes, I enjoy it. I'm actually a runner that does enjoy strength training, but because that's not my focus, I'm not competing for a body composition like a right one of those shows. I'm training for a marathon. So my training is very specific for a marathon. It's also specific for a marathon, not a different distance either. So it's very important if you want to really train correctly and properly and train like an Olympian to train daily, to train at least 5 days a week. That's what it takes. And I know people that have busy lives and they have told me straight out like I can only run 3 days a week. And that's fine, but you do have to be realistic with your goals. You can't have these huge, big goals if that's all that you're going to put into it. So that's the biggest thing. It's just being realistic with yourself. Number three, know how and when to push harder or give yourself a break. This is a really big one, and I see this a lot as well in my athletes that I work with. They either push themselves so much that they get injured, or they don't push themselves enough and are disappointed in why they're not reaching their goals or reaching that next step or feel like they're progressing. So it's really important to understand that. And I can tell you, being an amateur athlete, I'm not pro, I'm not an Olympian, but being an amateur athlete, I've experienced where this is not easy to figure out. It takes time. And I've only been specifically a marathon runner for the past 5 years. And the last 2 years have really got into really competing. Um, and it takes time, I guess. So be patient with that. But the greatest athletes and Olympians that you see out there are the ones that understand how to do this. They understand their body, they know how, and they know when to push harder and also to take a break, because there are times when we do need to take a break. And that can be really hard, especially when our emotions and our mental health gets in the way. And that's where I see that happen the most in just recreational and amateur athletes is, we're out there, running or whatever your sport is, to help with your stress and your anxiety. And then we push so hard, right? Because we keep pushing, 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 and we don't give ourselves a break, that we end up injured and then not being able to do that activity at all. So you don't want that to happen, but it does happen, and there's ways to cope with that. I, have athletes that's happened to, and I've been helping them through that. I haven't even helped them to train for a marathon, even though that is what they want. Right now, I do have a current client, and that's what we're working on. So we're working on, just coping with not being able to run, and what are those, talking about those strategies and things like that. So okay, that's number 3. Number 4 is to be positive, motivated, focused, and patient. This is why Olympians also are Olympians, because they know how to do this. They know how to be motivated. They know how to motivate themselves. They don't really need other, outside external forces motivating them. They know how to be positive and push those negative thoughts away, and they know how to have focus and also patience. Patience, I can tell you personally in my journey, is the one thing that I've been learning the most from the past 2 years. I've been trying to accomplish a big goal, at least for me, to run the Boston Marathon. If any of you are familiar with the Boston Marathon, you do need to have a qualifying time. And qualifying times have changed a little bit, because people are getting faster. More people are trying to get into the Boston Marathon. So it's not easy to do. And I've definitely, because of personal challenges, injury, as well as COVID, I've definitely had to be patient. And I really wasn't when I first started on this specific journey to run Boston. I was not a patient runner. So that is definitely something that I can relate to the most. Um, when I, thinking about how to fuel train and thinking like an Olympian, I'm like, yep, that that I can relate to the most. So hopefully you can also relate to some of those things. And then the last one that I have for you is prioritize rest and recovery. This is another thing that I see people do so much, that they don't put enough time in this. And this goes back to kind of the previous one that I talked about here, about knowing how and when to push harder, give yourself a break. But rest and recovery should be part of your training. It should be part of their journey. It should be part of the process. And a lot of people don't really understand that. So what happens is injury happens and frustration happens, and all of these things, right, that can lead to, harmful effects even to our body. So making sure to prioritize rest and recovery. And this is what Olympians do. These are all things that I just told you are all things that make Olympians Olympians. And that's what makes them great athletes that they are, because they do every single one of these things. And that's what's most important, is doing all of these. You could do one of these things really good and the other not so much. And that's where you might, be faulty. But that's not to say either, if you're not trying to be an Olympian, that you have to do every single one of these, right? but these are all things that we can learn, right? These are all things that we can learn from Olympians and to do better at. So, my suggestion or my advice to you would be to try one of these things or pick out one of these tips that I gave you, and think about which one relates to you the most and you think you need to work on the most. Just focus on that one. So I'll review real quick. So if you remember or are just joining me as well, number one was to hydrate properly, eat carbs, and consume adequate energy, and prioritize nutrition and fueling. Number two was to train daily. Be specific in your training. Number three, know how and when to push harder and also give yourself a break. Number four is be positive, motivated, focused, and most of all, patient with yourself. And number five is prioritize rest and recovery. So I hope that was helpful. And I hope all of you can at least pick one of those things and try to focus on that one thing. Even if you're not an athlete, hopefully some of these things, might have still resonated with you or you could relate to it. But that is what my advice would be, or my suggestion would be to pick one of those things to try to improve and to work on the one you think you need the most improvement on so you can fuel, train, and think like an Olympian. So that's all I have for today. Does anyone have any questions? All right. So if anyone does have any questions after I am not live anymore, you can still comment them below and I can come back and answer your questions. Also, feel free to reach out to me as well. I am available on Facebook and Instagram. You can also email me. So there are different ways that you can always reach out to me, contact me if you do have any questions at all. Probably the best way to get to know me more if you love my content and love what I talk about and what I do, is to join my Facebook group, and that's the Plant-Based Performance Running Community. So we would love to have you over there. If there's anything I can do for you guys, if there's any questions you have, again, don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you again for Virtual Veg Fest for inviting me to be a part of this series. Reaching your plant-based potential with Coach Kayla, and hopefully you will join me again back here next month. We go live. I go live every first Wednesday of each month. So we'll be back here in September, the first Wednesday of September, and hopefully I will see you then again. Bye.